Sometimes our friend Corey Braddock here will size it up this way. He will say, think of it in these terms. We're in July, and there is an Iowa football game in August. So, yes, we're more than a month away. But if you think about it in those terms, July to August, and Iowa football will be back on the field. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. This is our Hawkeye show, typically on Tuesday. So keep that mindset. We have delivered on Tuesday time after time after time. So we continue on Tuesdays at 4:30 Eastern, on 4:30 Central Time, but special edition of sorts. So we see you on a Wednesday. Corey, how you doing today?
Doing okay. I'm doing okay. Busy week. June flew by. July is going to do the same. Got a chance to chat with women's basketball newcomer last night, so we'll be publishing that on my channel here soon. So I mean, it's busy as ever. I know it's busy for you. You're kind of revamping things a bit, so yeah, I'm doing okay. That's cooled down a little bit here in Central Iowa as well, so that makes it a little bit more bearable.
So they're continuing the Iowa women's basketball program. They're not shutting it down, are they?
Yeah, isn't that crazy? They're not shutting it down.
Okay.
I don't know. Don't know when tickets go on sale. I'd be curious to know what percentage of the games are sold out. I'll make a bold prediction. I'll bet that every game is sold out again. Now, that's crazy to bet that because actually betting, but you get what I'm saying. Like, it's never happened before until last year. But regardless, I think Iowa fans are just still riding that high. So it's an exciting young class. They got the third leading scorer in the country transferring in Lucy Olson from Villanova. So that's positive. She's not Caitlin Clark, but she'll certainly turn some heads and some eyeballs. So lots to be excited about. And of course, the men did some good things in the portal and retained a guy who would have been drafted in Peyton Sandfort. So all positive.
Big Ten Football Media Days in about 3 weeks, everyone. We hope to be there in one way, shape, or form to have a presence here at the Voice of College Football. And, of course, join Corey from the Hawkeye of the Storm on a regular basis with the football, basketball, and Iowa athletics across the board. The Amazon links in the description section, folks, of all the videos. When you shop on Amazon, please use our link. We had started an opponents series last week and touched on Minnesota. We will continue that at some point. We tried to round up a media member from Wisconsin this week, but we will continue that series as we get close to August camp. We released a top 25 that actually makes sense. So that was a preseason edition, which I understand and I acknowledged during the video that flies in the face and completely contradicts what the top 25 that actually makes sense. The purpose of it is to evaluate the teams and the results on the field and the performance on the field, and there is none. But I was asked by a number of people to do it. Therefore, we try to base it in as much substance as possible. So you can check out, folks, where the Hawkeyes were placed. I don't know if you had a chance to check out where we've got Iowa placed. If we have Iowa, in fact, in the top 25.
I did not see the top 25. I did see your top 10 offenses, and I noticed Iowa was not there.
Yeah, they were on the cutting room floor, as they say. They had just missed the cut. And let's not so this is part something that we'll hit on as soon as I line up the tabs and show everyone, because you had alluded to our changes here at the Voice of College Football. So there's a new Voice of College Football official account page on X. So we will see ratings and rankings there that I know that are going to be attributed to me. They are not mine. They are not my personal rankings. So those are not my rankings, folks. You will know when they were my rankings, but otherwise those come from the team here at the Voice of College Football. So I have nothing to do with them, actually.
Have you released your defensive team rankings yet?
That is a good segue there, because I did want to hit you up on that one. Okay. EA Sports has released its. And so while you are evaluating that at number 13, I am going to find the rankings, because if somebody would hit me with, as you did a few days ago, EA Sports defensive rankings, I was at number 13. This is ridiculous. My initial thought is absolutely it's ridiculous. But to be fair, I would like to look at the top 12 again to see who we're competing against in this. But Yeah,
Well,
that would seem to be a snub for the Hawkeyes.
I don't know how EA Sport. Like I know everybody's excited about this EA Sports college football game, and I told somebody the other day on my live show, I'll probably buy the game just to have it, but I'm not a gamer per se. I do own a game system, but I've never been that guy. Uh, I was glancing through the 12 teams ahead of Iowa, Mark. The only thing I could think of is you have EA Sports, which obviously functions based upon computer rankings. Um, I think a lot of that's probably based upon talent evaluation and projecting. You probably have a bunch of guys on the defensive side who are rated collectively better than the guys on Iowa's defense per their computers, because I look at the teams ahead of Iowa and they're all powers. Every single one of them is a power, with the exception maybe being Utah, you could argue, but every single one of these teams is a blue blood. Prove me wrong, Mark. Every single one. They basically just put every blue blood out there and said, if you've recruited exceptionally well, you're going to be ahead of Iowa, or you're going to be on this list. I think it's a crappy list, frankly.
Okay, so I tend to agree with you. However, again, it's much like when you hear the criticisms of the NCAA men's basketball tournament field of 68, and different analysts will throw out 10 teams that should have been selected. Well, you need to throw out the 10 that should not have been selected then. So I'm with you. Iowa has a great defense and always has a great defense or a really good defense. I tend to back off on the term great. I think it's overused, but an extremely good defense, one of the best in the country. With better competition, we shall see. But I do think that they're legitimately a great defense from year to year in the recent 4 or 5 seasons. Ohio State was an exceptional defense last year. In my opinion, during the regular season, it was impossible. And I could have argued Ohio State, best defense in the Big Ten. I could have argued Iowa. I could have argued Penn State. I could have argued Michigan. They were all exceptional. Now, once I saw Michigan play in the playoffs in the national championship game, I thought, okay, I have to give it to them because they were so impressive against Alabama and Washington as well.
I just want to make something very clear. As of last season, as of the completion of last season, and I know some of this is projecting forward, I assume. I guess that's what we're assuming with these defensive power rankings. As EA
you
Sports,
have to consider who was lost and who was gained.
Sure. However, and there I come back to talent, right? I come back to projecting talent and performance based upon talent rankings. Iowa was ahead of, let's see, I looked this up earlier. I don't want to misquote here. They were ahead of Georgia in total team defense. They were ahead of Alabama in total team defense. They were well ahead of Oregon. They were ahead of Clemson. They were ahead of Texas. They were ahead of Florida State, and they were ahead of Utah. As of the completion of last season, and Iowa was in the top 10 of returning production. The only guy they lost, the only major, and not that Joe Evans and Noah Shan didn't play last year, but Joe Evans was a loss, but obviously Cooper DeJean's the big loss in the back end. They bring back 2 All-Americans at linebacker. They bring back an experienced defensive backfield led by Xavier Wampa, Quinn Schulte, Jamari Harris. I can't imagine that you can possibly, with a straight face, project teams that were not, the numbers say we're not as good as Iowa defensively last year, ahead of them this year when Iowa basically returns everybody.
So you call into question the numbers, and this is where, even though I'm considered a numbers guy by a lot of people, I'm a numbers guy within context guy. We released on our new X page the top 10 offenses, and Liberty was in there. And my response was, why in the hell is Liberty in this top 10? So let's make it clear that this does not represent me, because they are not one of the top 10 offenses in the country. They may produce numbers that say they are one of the 10 best offenses. So there is a difference there. You have to look at the schedule, have to look at the opponents.
Sure. Okay. Well, if we want to go down that rabbit hole, I guess we can. But I prefer to say, hey, Power 5, now Power 4 teams are fairly evenly evaluated as it relates to competition. And I know what you're going to say. Well, Iowa played in the Big Ten West. You're playing up against crappy offenses.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's
All
what I
right.
will say.
But I would also say that Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State were going up against some real crappy defenses, and the likes of Maryland, Indiana. Rutgers has been okay at times. Ohio State's offense 2 years ago was abysmal. So, I look at collectively of the last 5 to 10 years, Iowa's consistently there, even with more difficult schedules. Iowa played a very difficult schedule 2 years ago, and I would guess was ranked above most of these teams in total defense. I'd have to go back and confirm that, but that would be my suspicion.
So statistically, if you're going to measure the stats, well, the one thing I will say, let me back up there. Yes, Iowa's been elite defensively for about 4 or 5 years. Now, before that, the couple seasons prior to, they were merely a good defense, a top 25 or 30 defense.
What years are you talking? What years are you talking about?
I looked at the numbers after you presented this ranking. And 2018, 2017, they were 25, 30 in the country, in that range.
Yeah. Well, the offense was better. So, the defense, I would say the defense had the ball, and it's had an assignment less often, if that makes sense. Less opportunity. Well, it depends if you're talking about, are we talking about total defense? Or are we talking about turnover production? Are we talking about points per game?
Talking about the best defenses.
But I know, but what metric you're saying that Iowa was, average?
Like yards per play. I'm not saying they were average. They were 25 or 30 in the country in yards per play.
So the only way I would be willing to accept these rankings is if they were paired with rankings of top defensive coordinators in the country. And if Iowa was not in the top 3 in the country, I would have a conniption, because again, look at the 12 teams who are ahead of Iowa on this list. They're all doing it with exceptionally better talent.
So again, I'm pushing back to a certain extent, but I hope you realize from my initial statement, I am generally on board with you. I am generally in your camp. And if I had to play football this year, if I had to coach or run a football team in college football this year, and somebody gave me the Iowa defense, I would be ecstatic. I cannot argue that any of these defenses are definitely better than Iowa. 0 of them do I think is clearly better than Iowa. I would tend to think, if you gave me a choice, that I would take Ohio State and Georgia's defenses this year. But that doesn't mean that they will be better. I tend to think that they might be a little bit more dynamic, a little bit more explosive, and just downright just crazy good. But Notre Dame's going to have a great defense, and Clemson and Michigan. I really question Texas. I really question Utah.
Utah's defense was really good last year.
Florida State lost a lot off of their really good defense.
Utah's defense was really good last year as well, Mark, and they were very much similar to Iowa.
Yes. Now, I would not be surprised if we put these teams in tiers, and if the top 13 were in a tier, like if we got into the brains of EA Sports and they showed us behind the veil, and they said, well, we consider these to be the 13 best in the country, and then there's a drop off, I would say, okay, I get it now. Iowa just happened to be last in line.
Another reason why, for me, it's easy for me to look at this list and say it's biased toward recruiting rankings, and this is a projection as a whole, but it's biased toward individual talent rankings as opposed to maybe team production, and there is a difference, is I see USC at number 16.
Yes, that's terrible.
Okay, but does that not?
I don't know where that's coming from, other
Well,
than they picked up one of the best defensive coordinators in the
yeah,
country and
or
one of the best defensive line coaches in the country, and they have overhauled their defense.
they're a blue blood.
But also they are going to hit the field with a radically different defense this
I'm
year.
not saying that there won't be a lot better, but Iowa also got a new offensive coordinator. And you don't see anybody projecting Iowa in the top 25 offensively.
Yeah, they don't have top 25 talent on that side of the ball.
Okay, so again, this is where we're going back to. We're going back to what we perceive individual talent to be, as opposed to a stronger emphasis on coaching and recent history. Because recent history and coaching says that USC shouldn't even be close to this list.
Yeah, but they have a different defensive coordinator and a completely different defensive staff. The entire staff is different.
Okay, and Iowa has a different offensive coordinator and wide receivers coach.
But they've never been any good on offense in recent years. And USC has at least a level of talent that could produce something like that. Iowa doesn't.
Whatever.
Does that make any sense, what I'm saying?
It makes sense. I'm just saying I still think there's a huge flaw with these rankings.
The first thing out of my mouth when you mentioned USC, Corey, was I said, yeah, that's terrible.
Yeah.
So I agree, but I'm just giving some level of justification to it.
Oh, it's easy. I can justify it. I just think these are lazy rankings. That's what I think. I think they're lazy rankings.
And the other thing I will say is Virginia Tech doesn't recruit well, and Utah doesn't. They, in terms of, for them, they do for what their purpose is, but they don't place high in the recruiting rankings. So they did give Virginia Tech and Utah high rankings without high level recruiting.
Substitute USC for Utah here, and you've cut off the number 12 team. It's Oklahoma. Substitute USC for Utah. And I can argue that this EA Sports top 12 defensive power rankings, those top 12 teams are the top 12 blue bloods in college football. Not just now, but maybe in the history of the sport. That's how I think they're lazy rankings.
Yeah, I get it. Oregon's not.
Top 12? You don't think they maybe sniff number? Maybe
no.
Maybe they sniff number 12.
The top 12. No, so the last 15 years. Yes.
Okay, well,
absolutely, they are.
Yeah, most of the people who are doing this game aren't probably more than 30 years old, anyways.
Yeah, true. All of it true. The only last point I will make in a different approach with USC is and I don't know why I think of these in terms of NFL terms a little bit better. If you took the worst defense in the NFL from last year and gave them a new defensive coordinator and a new defensive staff, and I'm going to take this to an extreme, you just loaded that defense with all pros from all over the NFL, well, the projection would be that they would be much better the next season.
Sure. But you're not going to like this, Mark, but I go back to what I said. Iowa returned almost all of what it had. So
I agree with you.
So I'm saying talent. Why isn't Iowa up there with talent rankings? They have all these guys. They have guys who are All-Americans and guys who would have, like Sebastian Castro, who would have been drafted. Who cares what he was rated out of high school? As far as starting talent, Iowa is up there with every single one of these teams on the left and is more proven than several of them.
Okay.
Right or wrong?
Yeah, I'll agree with that.
That's all I'm saying. I mean,
I'll agree with that.
Regardless of what you're bringing in, Iowa's has got proven.
And absolutely.
Production.
Once you prove it on the collegiate level, the recruiting ranking is completely.
Exactly.
It's gone. You know, you're Sebastian Castro. You're one of the best players at your position in the country. Who cares when you get recruited? That was obviously incorrect.
And guess what? One of the guys who's not getting any All-American attention preseason is Xavier Wampa, who, by the way, was one of Iowa's rare 5-star recruits. So I'm just saying, like, any way you want to slice it, and they're not to say that there aren't holes. There are holes. We've discussed a couple of, defensive lines probably not as deep. Maybe there's a question at depth at cornerback, but boy, I just think it's hard to argue against Iowa, and I am biased. I will admit that.
I explained the other day that everyone's biased. So I too am biased. Now, in a discussion like this, I'm not much biased, but everyone's biased to some degree. So absolutely.
Well, it's easy for you sitting here and you have Ohio State number 1.
Well, no, it's not easy.
Yes, it is. It's easy. Of
Why?
course it is. What do you mean why? You've got Ohio State bias. They're the darlings this year. Everybody's got them number 1 in almost every category. They're projected to
They're
make.
loaded.
Well, I'm not saying there shouldn't be the
It's
the
loaded.
favorites. I'm just saying it makes it easy on you to sit
It
back and
doesn't make it easy on me. It makes it difficult on me doing what I do. I would rather be a Kansas State fan or a Stanford fan. I may change my allegiance. Maybe I'll do
well,
that.
you're not playing the games. You're not the one that has pressure. So, I mean, I would just enjoy being able to.
Well, my point is I have to endure some level of viewership that just thinks that I blow Ohio State out of proportion, but they're always in the conversation. They're just always in the conversation, so I can't avoid them.
Well, they
Like,
haven't been in the. It is amazing how much that defense has ascended, because that defense was not good a couple of years ago.
well, I mean, just in any conversation
Yeah.
involving whatever.
Yeah.
What I would like to do, if you have 30 seconds of any kind of analysis in you, is I would love to run and grab Phil Steele's rankings and
Sure.
see what he has.
Sure. Yeah, you go ahead, Mark. The only thing I'll say to our viewers is USC was a surprise on this list. Colorado is a surprise on this list. And frankly, I think if I'm a Cyclone fan, I'm frustrated because they return one of the best DBs in the country in Jeremiah Cooper. And now having an offense is, a capable quarterback and a really good running back helps them overall. But I still think defensively what they have done. I was just saying, Mark, I think Iowa State got snubbed on this list.
Yeah.
I mean, you could
I can
argue
see
they absolutely should be on this list. You bring back Jeremiah Cooper and really talented defensive line. They seem to be good up there every year. Their defensive coordinator is very similar to Phil Parker and how he coaches. They have different philosophy on different things, but that's another team, and they're certainly no blue blood. So
Here we go, Corey. This comes from the Phil Steele College Football 24. And by the way, he sent me 2. So I don't know if that goes back to I got a free one for a couple of years. So maybe since I ordered one, I don't know. I got 2. And so if it was worth it, I would send one to somebody. But anyway, let's start with defensive line. Let's point out the Big Ten teams. Ohio State's number 1, Penn State's 2, Michigan's 4, Nebraska's 5. Iowa's 13 defensive lines in the country.
Iowa's 13 in the defensive lines?
Yes.
That to me, that's way overrated.
Well, you got to understand there's a lot of turnover in college football. I think they're
Okay.
banking on coaching.
So they're banking on coaching.
Here you
EA
go.
Sports is banking on talent.
The first line right here from Phil Steele. This unit is always at the top, no matter how many starters return. So despite losing 2 defensive linemen to the NFL, they were just a number 6 DC. What is that? I'm forgetting my Phil Steele code, and a undrafted free agent. Oh, 6th-round draft pick and an undrafted free agent. All 4 starters are all Big Ten caliber, and this unit will be its normal dominating self.
See, but I respect the heck out of Phil Steele, but to act like Iowa's defensive line has been dominant is it's just not true.
Yeah, that's a pretty bold statement, heavy statement there.
Yeah, that's just not true. And they lost, not having Noah Shannon hurt, but they haven't had a dominant defensive line since probably like 2018. Well, 19. I think I'm thinking of the USC year, and that was what Epinessa's last season. They haven't
19,
really been dominant since then.
Yeah, 19.
They've been solid across the board. They've been deep, but like if we're looking at individual rankings, and even with, not knowing every team's turnover at that spot on the field. The Iowa's defensive line does not have, like, they have some proven production, but the guys that are not proven were not like these highly ranked kids. Like they're as thin at that position as I can remember as it relates to proven talent. Now they got some raw guys, a couple of freshmen that are, I think, could end up being dominant forces. Brian Allen Jr. is a guy who, if they could get him to come along, that'd be great. But Deontay Craig has, I think, underperformed. There was some expectation after his redshirt freshman year, and I thought he was just average last year. Max Llewellyn is solid, but I mean, he's an undersized defensive lineman at this level who will probably never play defensive line in the NFL. Almost assuredly will never play defensive line in the NFL. And Y.A. Black is a guy who we're still waiting for that switch, I think, to turn on and for him to fulfill the potential that it looks like he has physically. Aaron Graves, same thing. I loved Aaron Graves at high school. Still love the kid. Good kid. Has been solid, but has not been dominant yet. So I think that's that estimation, that evaluation, I think, is a little bit haphazard.
Linebackers. Elsewhere in the Big Ten, we've got Penn State 6, Oregon 7, Wisconsin 9, Ohio State 12, Michigan 18, Nebraska 19, Michigan State 20, Iowa number 1 at linebacker.
Number 1 in the
Phil Steele.
In the country?
Yes.
Okay. Well, that's a bold statement to make, but man, I can't imagine. I mean, I said this a couple of years ago when you had Seth Benson and Jack Campbell coming back. And frankly, Mark, is Jay Higgins, like, if you were to compare the two linebacker rooms, the top two guys in that room, because they play a lot of cash now with Sebastian Castor, who's ever playing that hybrid spot. If you're just comparing top two linebackers, as good as that linebacker room was with Benson and Campbell, could you argue Campbell and Higgins kind of cancel each other out?
Sure.
I think Jack Campbell will probably go down. Some of the plays he made, turnovers and whatnot, his ability to he made a couple of big plays, interceptions, and big moments of games, fumble recoveries, made a big return against Wisconsin late in the season a couple of years ago. But I think you can almost cancel those two guys out. And boy, Nick Jackson, I'd give him the nod over Seth Benson every time. And I like Seth Benson, but both of these guys that Iowa has this year have chances to make, be top 3-round draft picks, I think, next year. What isn't Nick Jackson like? Isn't he close to like the all-time tackle record in college football or something?
Yeah,
something
he is. He is. We should look that up.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I saw that somewhere. Secondary. Ohio State number 1, Iowa 5, Michigan 8, Penn State 9, Oregon 11, Wisconsin 12.
I mean, it doesn't sound like Phil Steele would have Iowa out of his top 10 nationally.
I don't know if he puts it all together. Maybe he does.
I can't imagine he would have him outside the top 10 based on those rankings, because he's at Iowa ahead of Penn State and these different teams. I mean, I know you're just giving me Big Ten rankings, but
no, those are not Big Ten rankings.
Well, no, you're reading the Big Ten.
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah.
I got to think he's got everything else in here. I got to think that he's got his defensive rankings put together. Now, he considers Iowa to be the 18th best team in the country. So he has 2 rankings. So he has one where he just basically says, these are the best teams in the country, 1 through a zillion. I'm not applying schedule. These are the best teams in the country, 1 through whatever. Then he applies the schedule and says, okay, well, the 10th best team in the country might play a brutal schedule, so I'm going to have them 24, etc. So he's got Iowa at number 18 as the 18th best team in the country. And then when he puts it together with the schedule, he is ranking Iowa. Where are they? Must have
probably top 15.
They got to be somewhere. Where are they? 11.
Wow.
Number 11.
Isn't it odd to think, and again, I know we're comparing two different two different rankings, two different people that are ranking these things, whoever's behind the EA Sports rankings. But isn't it odd that you could possibly argue that Iowa is a top 20 team overall and doesn't have a top 20 or top 10 defense? Because if you're ranking them top 18 in the country, but you think the defense is only going to be number 13, what does that mean about the offense? So does that mean the offense is going to be carrying half the load?
What does EA Sports rank Iowa overall? Do we know?
I have no idea.
Okay.
The only reason I see these rankings from EA Sports is because they pop up on social media. That's the only reason I see them.
Me too.
Good for them. Good for them. People are talking about the game, and I'm sure it's great for EA Sports.
Absolutely, folks. So while we're on at least the source of this particular conversation, I would like everyone to know that we have had a reset at the Voice of College Football. So in the past, you have certainly been favored with not only our college football coverage here at the Voice of College Football on X, but also my many musings about the world in general. So for those of you who enjoy hearing me rant and rave about all sorts of things, you're going to have to follow me on. I will show you the page here in just a second, and we will drop it in the chat. So if you want to follow me personally, that is a different account now. This is the official Corey account for the Voice of College Football Network. And I know, in addition to your chores at from the Hawkeye of the Storm, that you're mighty proud to be part of the official network.
I do like let me just say this. I do like the banner there. That's a slick looking banner. Now, what am I saying?
And there is no logo there. There is no profile because it's a verified account and X has to re-verify it. So that takes a couple weeks or something.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I was going to say,
what's
that big black spot over?
That's our issue there.
Who is that? And is that Edwards?
We are looking at Will Johnson, who might be the best defensive back in the country. Ollie Gordon, the now possibly suspended running back at Oklahoma State, who led the nation in rushing. We've got Quinn Ewers of Texas and Jalen Milroe at Alabama. And that was part of our social media conversation today. Mark, did we select the right players, et cetera? I said, just so we're representative of the country. We got a defensive player there. Fine. Let's switch it out every couple months.
Okay. Yeah, I'm excited. Does that mean no more Elvis Presley tweets?
Well, you're going to have to follow my personal account. No more Elvis, no more social justice banter, and I don't get on my soapbox. I will be getting on my soapbox. So I will do that elsewhere. I will do that on my personal account. This is all college football all the time, folks.
52,000 posts? You've made 52,000 posts? My goodness.
Where do you see that?
At the very top. Very top.
Oh, there it is. Yeah, I guess I have.
I'm trying to find how many posts I've made. It can't be 7. I've made 7,400. You've made 52,000.
Well, I've been on this thing since like 2009.
Okay. Well, that would help. Yeah. Mark, I know you said you didn't have much to offer with this, but a few weeks ago, we were going to run through my top 5 running backs of the Kirk Ferentz era.
Yes.
Can I do that? And I know we're not going to have data. I mean, I can pull up, rushing rankings and total yardage and that stuff. But can I read you my top 5 here?
This is your show.
Well, no.
This is your show. We only have a channel and a show because of Corey here. So
okay,
you call the shots. However, keep in mind, I'm unlike typically on Tuesday. I don't have any buffer here. I got a show in 5 minutes.
Oh, okay. Well, let me run through them. We'll go less than 5 here,
folks. There's my personal account. You can catch me there.
All right, top 5 running backs of the Kirk Ferentz era. We start with Sean Green, Doak Walker Award winner. Nobody's going to debate that. I think Liddell Betts deserves to be there as well, given the rare NFL success of Iowa running backs. He was, of course, at the very beginning of the Kirk Ferentz era. Albert Young, the numbers speak for themselves with Albert Young. Marcus Coker might be a little bit more controversial given the fact that he dealt with injuries after a huge, was it 2011? And then I'd say Fred Russell, number 5. He's a legacy guy. In fact, his nephew is an incoming DB for Iowa this year, who people are really excited about. So those are my top 5. The list as far as honorable mention could be quite large. I think some people would say I have a bias against Akram Wadley. I wasn't trying to be biased toward Akram Wadley, even though his legacy has forever been tarnished by some of the things that happened off the field. And of course, his choice, I'm not saying he's right or wrong, but his choice to go after Iowa and Kirk Ferentz and the staff legally following the 2020 scandal, but he would definitely deserve to be in consideration. Mark Weissman, you mentioned him last week. Very one-dimensional back. Okay. We know that. Very one-dimensional, but man, what a story coming from being a fullback at Air Force. And then Tyler Goodson. To me, those are your 3 big honorable mentions, given Tyler Goodson's production. But he struggled to run between the tackles. Mekhi Sargent, Jordan Canzeri would maybe be next on that list. And then I think it's far too hard to project. But that would, or comment on, that would be, those would be my top 5.
So if you just threw me that question and I did no research, Akram Wadley would be in my top 5. I have pulled up the numbers of Marcus Coker, who I remember well, but yeah, it's one decent season, then it's followed by a really strong season, of course, with 15 touchdowns in 2011. And remind me, how good was 2011?
That was a 7-5 season.
Who they play in the bowl game?
Ended up they lost
Boston College.
No, 11 was Oklahoma. They lost to Oklahoma in the Inside Bowl.
That was a good game. 27-24.
Yeah, well, 7-6 is not a good record though.
Yeah,
that was a poor year coming off a 2010 season that had a lot of hype going in, but they lost a lot after 2010. And Marcus Coker was really, really good. I don't think you can ignore that 2011 campaign.
So we have Coker with 1,000 season, and we've got Akram Wadley with 2 1,000-yard seasons. So there's Wadley in, of course, more recent times. Pretty similar teams. Of course, the 15 team that he contributed to was outstanding, a top 5 to 10 team in the country that almost played in the playoff. And then, of course,
had more help.
Gotcha.
I mean, like he was running with I'm not trying to take anything away from him, but he was running with fresh legs a lot more than Marcus Coker ever was. I mean, that 15 room was, I believe, Derek Mitchell Jr., Jordan Canzeri, Akram Wadley, and I might be missing one guy in there. And I don't remember who was backing up Marcus Coker in 11. It might have been Joel Hampton, who got hurt. Yeah, I mean, just totally different styles between Coker and Wadley. And I can't frankly, I know this sounds bad, but I can't put Akram Wadley with some of the stuff he's been accused of, and he's accused Iowa of some things, but some of the stuff he's accused of as it relates to how he handled fans and merchandise after his departure from Iowa. I have a hard time viewing him as an endearing figure in Iowa athletics, regardless of numbers.
You're including that in your...
I think, for me, from my perspective, I kind of have to.
Sure.
I just think it's hard to ignore that.
I don't.
Well, you're separate from, you're separated from the scandalous stuff.
And I try to separate myself. But again, I will argue there that you can't be unbiased. It's going to affect, some people are cold to the heart where it doesn't really impact them, others to varying degrees. So I'm not saying that it doesn't influence me, but I think I could justly, for example, rank O.J. Simpson as an all-time great running back. And he seems to be just completely dismissed. People don't want to deal with him. They don't want to. And I'm like, I see these running back lists of all-time greats in the NFL. And I'm like, where's O.J. Simpson? What? We're talking about football here.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to justify the man's
Well,
actions.
Akram
I would be
Wadley,
the last person to do that.
but Akram Wadley, you talk about Mark Weisman being one-dimensional. Akram Wadley was extremely one-dimensional. He could not run between the tackles. Could not get his weight up. Had a great spin move, but at times was careless with the ball. Was turnover prone at times in 14. So, I mean, I can give you reasons why I think he misses out on the top 5 other than just what he did after football. He also had no NFL success.
And
he didn't
was
even sniff the
obviously
league.
a zero factor in the passing game. Got 1 pass 2 seasons in a row.
Who are we talking about now?
Oh, I'm sorry. I pulled up Fred Russell's stats. My bad.
Yeah,
That's
don't
right.
be dissing on Fred Russell now. don't be dissing on Fred Russell. What he did in both those years, but especially 2002. I mean, he was instrumental in an all-time season. Now, who's the one guy we missed? Albert Young. Did you look at his numbers?
No.
His numbers might surprise non-Iowa fans more than anyone's. And he's a guy who I thought had a chance at playing in the league. And I was pretty young at that time, but he was one of the first guys I remember watching and being like, wow, this guy's a dude.
So he had 1 big season as a sophomore.
Yeah, but look at over 3 years. I mean, 3,100 yards over the course of his career. On the ground alone, I mean, close to 4,000 total offensive yards. That's pretty insane for an Iowa back.
Insane?
4,000 total yards for an Iowa back?
He averaged 4.8 yards per carry, and in college, that's not
I'm not talking about his per carry numbers. Those were not very well. 6 and 7 were horrid offenses, but I'm talking about just like longevity and I think that would you rather a guy who's putting together consistent, 8 to 1,200 yard seasons, or one guy who puts up one big season and then is hurt the rest? I mean, that was kind of Marcus Coker.
I hear you. Unfortunately, we have run out of time. From the Hawkeye of the Storm is the place to be. You guys all know that. On a regular basis for Iowa football coverage. Anything in particular to highlight this week?
Yeah, not any. Let me get this out. Nothing in particular other than we'll be publishing a couple more recruiting videos that I did not get published last week. And then, like I say, interview with an Iowa women's basketball athlete here coming up on Friday. So, and then I guess I got to start thinking about my position previews, my schedule preview, all that stuff. You always think back in February, Mark, I got all off season. And then it's like, oh, wait, it's July.
Yeah. So multiply that about 50 times. And that's where I'm at right now. I'm thinking about all sorts of content that should be out there.
Well, at least you have a full team that can take care of that stuff.
Do I, in fact? All right. Appreciate y'all being here at the Voice of College Football next Tuesday. That's why you like and subscribe, folks, and hit that bell for the notifications to know when we go live. And we will see you next time. Appreciate you being here.